Hi, everyone. This video is all about General Motors sustainability report highlights and also their supplier expectations. This video I have a soft spot for because my very first client that I helped support, they were supplying to General Motors, and I got to figure out what the General Motors sustainability team needs from its tier one suppliers. So please watch this video if you're interested in what General Motors is doing from a sustainability perspective, and or if you're a supplier and you have to figure out what you need to do to continue to supply to them from the environmental perspective, labor and human rights, ethics, and procurement. So hang tight for a couple minutes. Let's go through what they do. Let's go through what you need to do. And I hope this is helpful to you. Okay, let's go. I would be shocked if you've not heard of General Motors, but they are one of the world's largest automakers. So, why General Motors sustainability strategy matters? Well, they have this goal, and it really will shape the future of the automotive supply chain, or it has been. So, I mean, they set some very lofty goals around protecting the environment, making sure that they're being sustainably conscious. And they've started pushing that down to all of their facilities, all of their sites, but also down to their supply chain. And I mean, you can think about the complexity of an automotive supply chain. Think about all those businesses that work in that groove. Well, they all need to start thinking about the environment and about people as well. Suppliers must align with their environmental, social standards, or guess what happens? They choose a different supplier. That's why this video is so important. So, for those new to sustainability and kind of needing to learn about it or do it, if you're curious what a big company does for sustainability, there's typically a web page on their website that talks about sustainability, or it may say ESG, environmental social governance. So, you can go to General Motors and find this. You can find their latest sustainability report, and you can dive into way more details than you probably ever want to. When I worked with clients at the very beginning of my career in sustainability, they would oftentimes say, "Oh, it's kind of like what we had to start doing in health and safety a few years ago," or "It's kind of like what we had to start doing when we had to start doing ISOs." So sustainability is kind of the same thing. You got to pull data together. You got to explain what your company is doing for certain aspects of sustainability, like environment, energy, labor, etc. And then you got to tell them, you got to tell your big customers what you're doing. So let's spend a couple minutes on their site looking at their latest sustainability report. You guessed it. It's www.gm.com/impact/sustainability, but you can head to their website. And as you can see, it kind of looks similar to the other large companies across the world. They usually have a page dedicated to sustainability. They talk a little bit about zero, which is trying to get their whole business down to zero emissions or net zero greenhouse gas emissions over time. You can see lots about how they think they're going to get there. But what I always like to do is go to the latest sustainability report. Don't be worried that the date's kind of back a couple years. Typically, it kind of works like financial statements. So companies will put out last year's after that year has wrapped and so on. So the latest one we can see today is the 2023 Sustainability Report by GM. We're on their latest sustainability report. It's 84 pages. I'm not going to go through all the pages, but I just want to tour you. You can see a little bit about the scope or boundaries of the report. That's important because they're talking about covering 31 countries, for example. How many employees do they have globally? And then they talked a little bit about their focus, which is electrification, safety, a path to autonomous, and sustainability. We can click on their strategy too, which will really show us what they care about. I always go to see what a company's goals are. So for General Motors, they want to reduce their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions from their operations by 72% against a 2018 baseline by 2035. That's super lofty for their own operations. They also want to source 100% renewable electricity by 2035, which is pretty lofty as well. They're talking about their scope 3 greenhouse emissions, which are going up and down their supply chain, which is definitely the complexity we're starting to see, and that nudge that tier 1, tier 2 suppliers are starting to feel in order to report their own sustainability impact. So we're seeing that. They also have sections in the report under environment specifically, for example. Let me click there. They talk specifically about their mitigation plan for emissions. We can see more information on scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And also definitely looking at EcoVadis. So I think I talked about CDP and EcoVadis for tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. They're starting to hold their supply chain accountable. And if those businesses in their supply chain can't go and get a rating from EcoVadis and a badge that they're happy with or a medal they're happy with, then General Motors will look for somebody else to supply it. So that's another thing to look at. Then we can look at innovation. They're trying to do a lot. Again, about EV, about battery technology. How often are we talking about batteries these days? It's a lot. Also, talking about social, they talk about diversity, inclusion, harassment, discrimination, and so on. In this report as well, they want to make sure they're recruiting and keeping the best people that they can. And then they talk about governance a bit too. Governance is really making sure there's an ethics policy, a public policy, and environmental compliance, and that they're not just throwing these targets out there and then not trying to meet them. And in the appendix, we can see more information, but they have data reports that are separate from this beautiful 84-page sustainability report that you can dive into anytime. Now, what I want to focus on is okay, great. So now what's that push on suppliers and when do we have to do this by? All right. So maybe this is happening to a business that you know or your business, but suddenly, you've been supplying to General Motors for years and years and years, and this pops up and you got to figure it out because you're a tier 1 or tier 2 supplier of theirs globally. So typically what the first roadblock will be is you'll be asked to do EcoVadis. So you can Google this on the side. We also have a video available. EcoVadis is a rating system and they're third party. And basically, what they do is they look at companies in a larger company supply chain and they assess them across environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. They look at if they have policies in place, if they're addressing key issues. They look at reporting structures. They look at if there's any actions or measures. And they also do this 360 watch to see if there's any weird reputational instances that could ding this company. And General Motors loves this because they can go back and look at all their suppliers and say, oh, great, this grouping of suppliers have earned XYZ score from EcoVadis. Great, we can still use them next year. Oh, these ones we're a little worried about. They didn't score as high. Let's give them a warning. And maybe in a year we can't use them anymore. We got to pick somebody else who has demonstrated and proven that they're more sustainable, for example. What's also happening is a bit of a push toward the Carbon Disclosure Project. This is a separate thing. It's different than EcoVadis, which you could submit any time in the year. CDP is always a specific time for all businesses globally. And this year it's September 17th right now. And basically it's focused solely on carbon, which you would guess from the name. They're looking at carbon disclosures and emissions data here. They also will continually monitor this. They want to make sure that you're not only achieving a good score in the first year, but that you're trying to improve it year over year over year. General Motors, in my opinion, does a really good job of trying to educate everybody in the supply chain. They hold webinars, they have lots of slide decks, informational sessions. And honestly, you can just reach out to a human on their sustainability team to ask a question. So if you're worried and you're a supplier of General Motors, don't be, because there's lots of help out there for you to write your very first environmental plan, for example, or track your very first year of energy consumption at your business and so on. So really the goal is transparency, which is pretty obvious, and accountability, because General Motors is making these bold claims online and it would ding their reputation if their suppliers didn't do it too. One note that I want to make is, today General Motors is asking for EcoVadis ratings from its suppliers and in some cases asking for CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project. It could be that this changes along the way. It could be that they add a couple of things that you need to do as a supplier, or increasing your score year over year. One thing that I really don't think will ever change is the requirement of sustainability on your business. You're always going to have an active policy tracking metrics year over year, training your employees and getting certain certifications, ratings, and so on. So maybe the tiles on this page will change over time, but I truly believe the need for sustainability at your business, specifically in the automotive industry, it isn't going away. So to recap, I hope this was helpful to you. We went over what General Motors is looking for from their suppliers. We also touched on what General Motors is doing themselves, what goals they put out, what data they track. It's important to show that they actually track their own stuff too. Remember, from 31 countries, they've set some pretty lofty goals, some specifically for 2035. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you are a supplier of General Motors and a little bit kind of worried about meeting the expectations that they have on you, my advice is don't be. My advice is just get help early. Don't try to go this alone. I often see people try to do EcoVadis on their own without the knowledge of what it's looking for, and they score low, maybe in the 20% in the first year. It's difficult. It's kind of a whole new beast. It's a whole can of worms that you open. So reach for help. Lots of companies out there have done it. Lots of consultants like me can help you figure it out. Just leave yourself some time. Don't give yourself a week to get this all together. And the other thing is train your people, because they're going to be really proud that you're taking steps toward becoming more knowledgeable and more sustainable. So it's going to benefit you in the long run as well. It'll help your revenue because you're maintaining this customer or customers. It'll help decrease expenses because you're starting to look at your energy consumption, maybe starting to reduce it, starting to reduce those bills. So being sustainable is smart to keep your large client like General Motors, but it's also super smart because it helps the bottom line and your profitability. All right, I hope you found this helpful. It was a pleasure. If you ever have any questions, reach out and have a great day. See ya.